Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Roundtable Show. This is episode 378. We do this live, and you can watch us on Facebook at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every Friday, like I say. I've got a great panel here. One's walked off already. Don't know why I upsetted him. Oh, he's coming back. But they're like wandering cats, my listeners and viewers. They come in, they go out, they wander. We've got a great special guest and a friend of the show, BrianJackson, Chief Marketing Officer of Kinsta. Brian, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Sure, yeah. Like you said, Chief Marketing Officer at Kinsta. So right now I'm just helping them. We offer premium managed WordPress hosting. So I pretty much am living and breathing in that world every day. And yeah, happy to be here. It's been a while. I know I was on here. Oh, it's been, what was it, last year now?
Yeah, time goes so quick, doesn't it, Brian?
Yeah, it does.
It does, but I classify you as a friend. And Kinsta's a great sponsor of the show, and it's much appreciated. I've got Spencer. Spencer, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Sure, glad to be back. Spencer Foreman from WP-Launchify, and we help anybody who's doing membership sites on WordPress, marketing automation in particular, or even e-commerce.
And we've got Chris. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Thank you. I'm Chris Badgett from Lifter LMS, which is a WordPress solution for creating, selling, and protecting engaging online courses.
And I will be joining you later on today, won't I? Would to tell the listeners, or I suppose, is it worth it? It's going to be after it, really. But I'll be joining Chris today, online. And Sally, would you like to introduce yourself to listeners and viewers?
Certainly, I'm Sally Getch, the WP fangirl, also the currently not very organized organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup. We are still looking for people to come present at the meetup in 2019. So if you are in the Bay Area and you have a topic that you want to, rehearse for the WordCamp you're applying to or something, please get in touch.
It's a great group. Before we go into the main stories that I've selected for this week's show, I want to mention one of our other great sponsors, and that's WP Fusion. And what is WP Fusion? Well, in your technology stack, obviously you should have WordPress, but you should have a CRM. It is 2019, folks. You've got to hype that marketing up to a higher standard. And if you've got those two bits of technology in your technology stack, you need WP Fusion, especially if you're running a membership course or e-commerce site. And the reason why you need it is it will put your relationship between these two key parts of your marketing system on steroids, and you can do all sorts of fabulous stuff, which I have not got the time to explain to you in detail. But go to the WP Fusion website, and they've got a load of videos and other resources that will explain why this is such a fantastic idea for you to go to their website. And if you buy one of their packages, they've offered us an exclusive deal. If you use the coupon code WP-Tonic, all uppercase, you get 25% of any of their packages, and that's exclusively only offered to you listeners and viewers of the WP-Tonic show. So we're going to go into the first story, folks, and that's WordPress explores possible for block directory to host single block plugin. What a bloody title! My God, farmers, who bloody wrote that? Sally, what did you think of that one?
Well, I would love to have a directory of individual blocks, because what we see happening right now is people are publishing collections of blocks, which are, things that are commonly used. But if you really like the post grid from one collection, but you want, the map plugin or the call to action or whatever from the other plugin, you have to install 2 plugins full of blocks and then try to turn some of them on and some of them off. And being able to just install what you need is good. Now, the discussion that seems to be going back and forth is whether this should be something where you can install them from within the editor or not. And I'm happy to have them just be things that you install like other plugins. I mean, Gutenberg is going to be moving beyond just the editor, and we have to kind of think about how that's going to work for the widgets and menus and things. But I like the idea.
Well, that's great. You didn't write that title, Brian, did you?
No.
What do you think of it?
You know, I actually kind of like the idea too when they first started talking about this, just because I'll be honest, I use Gutenberg on a couple of my small sites, but on my sites where I'm really writing a lot of content, I'm still using the classic editor just because, I don't know, my workflow, it's hard to change. I'm probably with a lot of people. And the blocks is something that I've just been so busy. I haven't been able to keep up with all the new blocks plugins out there that people are launching. And so I actually think having like a central repository where you could find them all and install them is not maybe a bad idea, because if I'm having trouble keeping up with them and are a little confused, I'm sure normal end users are, having trouble saying like, which blocks plugin should I use? Where are they? And I think there are a lot of good ones out there too. I've tried a couple of them, but yeah, I think it's a good idea.
I'm in a strange, I would say 99% of my customers, we haven't, we're still a classic editor, and we've informed them about the changes in WordPress, but they're just stuck with what they've got. And I've tested it a bit, not to the extent Sally obviously is, and using it. I am going to have to kind of spend some time doing that, because obviously, as Sally pointed out, it's going to move away from the actual editor and change the fundamentals of WordPress at some future date. What do you reckon, Spencer?
I think this is a great opportunity to fix a lot of what's wrong with the WordPress repository, and then at the same time provide, I kind of use those metaphors, but a standardization, I always talk about USB when marketing automation is concerned. Let me use vending machines as the metaphor. Right now, it'd be ridiculous if you went to the ice rink for your kid's skating party or something, and there was a separate vending machine to sell every single one of those products. I want a pack of gum, I want a cinnamon roll, I want a popcorn. You need the vending machine so that you can put any kind of thing inside of there. You put your money in and get it. And it makes a lot of sense. And Sally was definitely the one who brought this idea forward of, let's make it that this vending machine is really awesome. You can literally have metadata that is useful about each and every block so that somebody could go into one vending machine, find what they want, save it, store it, reuse it, instead of the current mess that is the current WordPress repository for plugins. Like if you type a word that and it's got a space in it or a hyphen, the plugin doesn't exist, or the plugin is delisted because somebody didn't update it in the last 5 years, even though it works perfectly fine, or blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's such a disaster, the WordPress repository, that you should just search Google to find the plugin in the repository. Here's a chance for redemption. One vending machine, put Morton or Sally in charge of it, and just...
God, you sure you're afraid of that? That's not a great job, is it? That's a lovely job.
But the point is, there's somebody. Maybe this is a good job for...
You just said me. Yoast. Can you imagine me head of it?
Yoast can finally redeem himself with this vending machine.
He
put it in there. And you know what I think could happen? I think there's a really good chance, although I'm a huge fan now of Elementor. I've been converted by their latest actions of just saying, wow, this is a chance for the WordPress community's open source thing to actually have a really parallel competition with something where it really functions well. To everybody can make a little popcorn bag or a little pack of gum that goes in there for a specific purpose, but now everybody can actually use it as a system. That's how I envision in my fairy tale world this working. I don't know if it'll get there.
Yoast and his wife invited me over to Holland for Christmas. No, they haven't.
Live broadcast.
Right. Chris, what did you think of this?
I think it's good, and I think we do need a block vending machine. We have a theme vending machine, a plugin vending machine. I don't think all those things should be combined into one vending machine. And in this article, there's a mock-up on a piece of graph paper that I think looks pretty promising. I think WordPress has proven the model with the plugin repository, despite its problems, that it's a great way to find free tools for your website. It's a great way for businesses to offer value for free and then have, you know, more advanced private premium plugins or whatever. The part where I'm a little foggy is, or where I think there's some trouble brewing is in the sketch, there's if you search for a contact block, there's like one that pops up that's built in or that you already have access to. And then there's a directory below. And whatever comes up in those first three positions, how does that happen? Who gets to decide what comes up first, and what is we need more transparency around that.
You're getting back to that we business, to that Norwegian guy. So who's the we, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying it's going to be important to make sure that it's really transparent how that kind of sorting and filtering and prioritization in this comes up.
You must know that will never happen.
Well, the other issue that I'm seeing that I just want to point out is there's also going to be a lot of block opportunities out there that are going to have dependencies on plugins.
Yeah.
So as an example, like there's the WooCommerce product block, but in order to use that, if somebody types in product, they're also going to need a plugin for that to work. So how do we deal with all those dependencies? Or are we only going to be featuring blocks, free blocks, that are completely just one-trick ponies that aren't dependent on another tool? So that's where it starts to get really messy in my mind. But overall, this whole concept of a block directory is a direction we need to head into. We just need to be careful about fairness and making sure that the free and the premium players and all the dependencies get managed well.
Yes.
They can do that thing which pops up where like it gives you a notice that like if you selected this block, you need that or whatever. I was thinking the same thing about the order, but why not just make it agnostic so there's no featured 3 at the top? It's just you do a search and it just comes up with a filter that, you know, here's by alphabet, by lowest price, by, you know,
Every plugin would start with A, would it?
Well, like Amazon does. Like if you search for products, you know, you can filter it. And then,
but they totally put their sponsored stuff at the top.
Well, you know, it's going to end up being like Google AdWords or something. It's going to just end up being like the top 6 spots are all going to be Jetpack, and Who Paid Automatic. But that shouldn't be the way it should be. It should just
I don't know. Not if Jetpack does so many things at once.
Right. It's all in one.
I also want to add, just as a regular user, I think we just need to make it easy in the same way that the App Store is easy. There are free apps and there's paid apps, and it's really simple for the end user. So we need to like take this model that kind of already works in some other ecosystems and just streamline the user experience so that WordPress is easier to use.
Yeah, it's been that's been an ongoing debate, isn't it? And a frustrating one. I don't know, but you never know. It might change, won't it? Words of wisdom might prevail. On to the next story. Mike Wixton, for the first time, big tech faces credible threat of breakup. What did you think of this one, Brian?
So yeah, I was reading this earlier. I don't follow politics a lot on purpose. I just feel like I'm better not following it. And
you're not going to dive into the cesspool of American.
Yeah, so I feel like there's
I've dived straight in. I have.
For me, a lot of stuff that they talk about never happened. So it's kind of until something actually gets close to happening, I don't know if it's just a waste of time to even dwell on it that much. This is actually one that I hadn't read about before, so it was actually interesting to read through it. And breaking up the big companies because they're monopolies. I honestly don't ever see that happening. But if it does, I mean, it will be the biggest thing that's like literally ever happened to, these industries. It was using an example of Google, they power search already, and then they would not be allowed to run, I think, Google AdWords or something. So they can't have both monopolies on both things. I don't ever see that happening, to be honest. But if it does, I don't know if it's such a bad thing, because I guess you would have new companies popping up to take some of these other spots. But also as a marketer, I'm thinking of like my workflow too. I sometimes don't mind that there are these monopolies. I know that might sound horrible to some people, but if I'm having to bounce around between even more tools, that's just a nightmare for me. So I don't, sometimes monopolies for marketers are good because we can bounce around and do things all at the same time. Like Facebook, I can go and, share stuff in Facebook groups. I can go share stuff on our Facebook page, and I can run ads on some of our stuff. Like, it's all actually fairly easy for me to do. If Facebook was to get rid of their ad platform, obviously I'd probably end up going to whatever ad platform that is to do the stuff I was doing there. So I don't know. I don't see this happening, but I feel like it'd end up being more work for me. So I don't think I'd actually want it to happen.
Yeah, I can answer before I pass it over to the other panelists. I can see where you're coming from. I think like the idea that you could break up Google, but could you break up Google dominance of search? Probably not. That fight is done and over with. Who should own Google search is a different question, and who its owners and its real purpose. That's probably a worthwhile debate. Facebook, well, it's a social media platform. They're probably in the future they're going to be other ones. Even though I consider them kind of semi-cockroaches, I'm not so disturbed by them. When it comes to Amazon, oh well, God, they should be broken up tomorrow. What do you reckon, Spencer?
First of all, I would definitely be sad if you tried to break up Amazon, because I need my 15-minute delivery of something all day long. And I mean that sincerely. I will say I was watching a movie, American Gangster, with Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. It was an older movie, but the whole point of it was about the 1970s heroin trade in New York City and blah, blah, blah. The point or the lesson that carries over from this is that you are never, as a politician, ever going to succeed in today's climate in universally or unilaterally breaking up any monopoly. So whether you want to say Elizabeth Warren has signed her own political death warrant or not, that's essentially the result of this whole...
What about Teddy Roosevelt? I think he was quite successful breaking up bloody monopolies, wasn't he?
Different. I'm going to tell you what the difference is. If you are a student of history, I don't know how Skype managed to break through my my notice off. If you are a student of history and you look at how the early monopoly busters worked, they didn't work at it from being a sole politician working with the public support. They worked at it from backdoor deals with whom? The other larger monopolists. In other words, you get two monopolists, they will kill the third monopolist. The whole point of this movie that I was watching was the way that this guy ultimately goes down is that the other, mobsters kind of collaborate to get rid of him in cooperation with the police. That's the situation here, is that you're never going to get Apple or Google or Amazon to go down on their own unless Google and Apple team up to kill Amazon, or Amazon and Apple team up to kill Google. There's no politician that is powerful enough, because as the article rightly points out, they're all just proxy representatives in all these other countries, and they sit in their protected bubble in Silicon Valley. Thank you, Sally.
You have to emphasize the con, you understand, because there's so much of it going on.
Right. And there's nobody that is going to touch them. Even Gavin Newsom, who has some controversial politics of his own in California, is not stupid enough to say, well, we'll hold these guys, come and get them. It's just never going to happen. So the whole conversation is sort of silly, because at the end of the day, the infrastructure and everything else that everybody, especially the politicians, rely upon cannot be just taken away. It has to be replaced by one of the other monopolists' systems. That's it.
Yeah, but Spencer, can't you see Jeff Bezos in a James Bond film? He's the head of Spectre. All he needs is a white hat, and he's trying to get people up in space. It's something out of a James Bond movie, isn't it?
The best James Bond movie What was the name of the movie? It was one of the Daniel Craig movies, or maybe one of the last ones, where the guy on the inside of MI5 was the dirty guy who tried to turn all the MI5 bad. And that's the scenario here, is that if you're really going to change this, it has to be an inside job. The rest of us are too far down the road. The only redeeming thing I can think of, which is just too far-fetched at this point, is that there was a time when there were companies like Nokia or BlackBerry RIM who owned the whole market. And then poof, they were gone overnight, because if suddenly we have holographic internet stuff, right? Or it's a eyeglass piece, and we don't need the infrastructure these guys have anymore, that's a way they could go away too. But, so far that's a little far-fetched.
I think there's quite a few. Go on.
Oh, I think what Spencer said earlier too is important about how he likes Amazon. I think we as consumers like monopolies, even though we might not ever say that online, or we complain online about Google privacy and all that stuff. But I think everyone likes monopolies because it makes our lives easier. I, for one too, like Amazon. I would not want them going anywhere. They make my life really easy. I don't have to leave my apartment if I don't want to.
You're like Spencer. You're like Spencer.
Yeah.
You never leave your place, do you?
Yeah, I mean, Amazon gives me that option now. And yeah, I can have something like here the same day if I need it. So I think consumers deep down really actually like monopolies existing. So I just wanted to mention that.
Well, that would explain why America tends toward them. I mean, if you look at okay, so they broke up Standard Oil in 1911? And they broke up Ma Bell in 1982. And what happens? You get an initial sort of splintering and division, and then you get progressive consolidation. And where do we end up? Back at pretty much a monopoly. I mean, it's big oil has consolidated to the point where there's 3 oil companies in the world. That there are not, and we still have effective monopolies on a lot of things. It's I don't have a choice of cable internet providers. Not really. It's basically, if I want cable, it's Comcast. If I want DSL, it's AT&T. And since they couldn't give me a decent landline, I was darn well not going to attempt to get my internet through them. We don't have real competition in most things, which is why we overpay for a lot of stuff. Right. And, sometimes it's good because the monopoly is run in a way where consumers mostly notice the benefits, and sometimes we mostly notice the problems. But it does seem that, we could try to break these things up, and then, within the next 10 years, we would just end up with pretty much where we started, which is why I put that Bloom County cartoon into the Slack about, Ma Bell reemerging as AT&T, which Brian is probably too young to remember.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to just let the voice of reason, Chris, have the final say. Is Jeff Bezos Bond villain or enabler of people never to leave their homes?
He's not evil. He's just a reflection of human nature.
Well, don't you see him with a white cat and a diamond tooth? And he wants to put fins up into space. What more evidence do you need?
Elon Musk wants to put things in space too.
Yeah, he's Rocket Man now, isn't he? What do you reckon, Chris? Sorry, I interrupted.
Politicians are marketers. And if we've learned one thing from the last presidential election, is that the popular marketing strategy these days for politicians is to have an enemy or lots of enemies, whether that's the swamp that's Congress, the Mexicans, the list goes on. But if Elizabeth Gilbert here, it's in some ways it's a little disappointing to me coming from the Democratic Party that we're going to make some of the most successful companies in our country the enemy. I think what we need right now is a leader who, instead of pointing the finger, more holds up a mirror and catalyzes the people around more of a grassroots mobilization, kind of like how Barack Obama went after the change thing, but somebody who can do it with more effectiveness and results post-election. I don't think that Facebook, Amazon, and Google are evil. I think entrepreneurship in the free market can still disrupt companies like these, even though they are massive. But, you know, there is a place for government to, you know, regulate runaway like market dominance where there's an unfair advantage. But I'm not sure we're actually to that point yet, despite the scale and size of the success of these companies.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. We're going to go for our break, folks. We just had the voice of reason. And we'll be back with some more discussion where I'm going to be very unreasonable. So we'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. Steve, Jeff Bezos, and his Rocket Man, and he's whatever he's up to. Mind boggles. On to the next story. That is from our guest, BrianJackson. I read this and I thought it was a great article, so I asked Brian if he'd come on and have a chat with us. My 5 biggest failures as a marketer, entrepreneur, cost me 15 years. He's only a young man. Although I've failed consistently and I'm an old man. But there we go. Brian, why did you write this, and what was the main thing that you wanted to get across with this article?
I'll just point out I did start early. I started early.
In your nappies, basically.
Yeah, I wrote that mainly because I think just living in the marketing world every day, like there's so much bad stuff on the internet as far as like people thinking everything's just an overnight success. Because lots of the people that you see doing really well online right now, you know, they've done the grind. They've done the 10 to 15 years of failures of figuring how things work. The thing is, a lot of them don't share about that stuff, which I think is the more important stuff to share about. They share about, you know, how they're already at the point of like, you know, they're trying to sell their workflow or their, you know, their product or stuff like that. And then they just appear super successful. And I've chatted with a lot of people there that are just, you know, frustrated. You know, they're working from home, trying to do online marketing, trying to do SEO, you know, and they're frustrated that it's not going faster. And, you know, my advice is always that lots of successful companies and people doing marketing, like it takes a lot of time to figure out how to be successful. There are, I think, sometimes, you know, overnight successes that just people get lucky and they find the right niche or they find, you know, the right audience. But most of the time, people have had to do the grind of, you know, of just failing multiple times. And, you know, if I look back at, you know, the article I wrote, you know, I think a guy left a good comment actually saying, these aren't failures at all. And I actually agree with him. Like, I had to go through all this stuff to learn what I'm doing now. And so I wouldn't go back and probably change any of it because all the failures taught me something about marketing or, you know, how to market on the internet, or how to make money online. So, yeah, I think, yeah, the point of the article was just, overnight success is not always a thing. And so, yeah, I kind of was just sick and was on a rant one night because I kept seeing people just thinking things should go faster, and it doesn't always go faster. So,
what did you think of the article, Spencer?
I like the article a lot. I don't know how, Brian, are you able to tell, how old are you?
I'm 33.
Okay, so first of all, it was a great article.
Again, Spencer.
Well, no, I'm gonna relate to that. It was a great article because it's obviously truthful and from the heart, and it explains a lot about your situations. But one of the things I'm going to relate it to is that I appreciate articles like this, but I also want to hold on. Let me put on my old man cap for a second. I'm 52 and a single dad of 3 kids and gone through a lot of things. I think that somebody in my age bracket with my, let's say, history behind me is able to look at the things that happen in the business world, in the online entrepreneurial world differently than people who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, as well as people with different statuses in life, single people versus people with kids versus people with physical things they've had to overcome, emotional things, etc. The point of the story is that I like articles like this because if I could time travel back to that picture of myself as 25-year-old, you know, spit and vinegar and like bam, 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 you know, it's me, and I'm getting up there. And I had my shares of successes, but like any good entrepreneur, I've had my peaks and my valleys, dramatic shifts, personally, professionally, financially, and otherwise. And the one consistent thing I can say as a 52-year-old, that is what I would tell my kids. I have 3 boys. I tell anybody who's an entrepreneur is, I appreciate anybody who is a 20 or 30-year-old who's doing the drive, even a 40-something-year-old. Keep asking yourself, why am I doing this? Because the one thing I know as a 50-plus-year-old, and any 50-plus-year-old will say the same thing, is that looking back on the journey, I realize happiness, satisfaction, what you're doing with the rest of your life is much different looking at this age than when you're in the middle of that uphill climb. And regardless of where your successes are, whether you're a multimillionaire or whether you've just failed for the 20 millionth time, that whole journey of going from A to B, asking yourself, why am I doing that, is the only thing that matters, because there's going to be so many course corrections and so many things that whatever, it will make you nuts. Even when you get the wins, you'll be like, why aren't I happy? Why isn't this enough? I just made $1 million. Why do I feel miserable? It's because not knowing that the why is really looking for something that doesn't have as much to do with this win or that failure. It has to do with like where you're going to be at the end of this journey. And for many people, I mean, it's nice that you've written it out. Many people, they don't self-examine this until they get to a point where they're really miserable. Somebody helps them look through it, or maybe until time has passed. Anyway, sorry, waxing philosophical. Point of the story is that I get driven a little nuts when I talk to 20 and 30-year-olds who are entrepreneurs, and their whole attitude, rightly so, is so like, I'm going to F you so hard, and I'm going to be a douchebag, and I'm going to do this and that and that. And I'm like, just wait till life kicks you in the balls 4 or 5 times, and your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your wife leaves you, and your kids hate you, or your dog, you know, shits on your desktop.
Even your dog doesn't love you.
I'm just saying, like, wait till that happens, and then you'll remember this conversation maybe, and you'll think like, you know what? Maybe I could smooth out the journey a little with a little bit more perspective. And so,
before I move it on to another panelist, Brian, why do you think you tried all these different things? Honestly.
Well, I actually think kind of what Spencer touched on, actually thinking of like the drive itself. I think any entrepreneur, like, there's like a drive that you actually kind of enjoy all these little adventures. Even if they're failures, like there's something that's just driving you to keep going. Otherwise you would just get a job, sit in the cubicle and do your 8 to 5 thing. Like there's nothing stopping any of us from, just doing that.
Oh yes, there is.
Well, but do you also, because you talked about it in the article, and you've talked about it in public and on this show when you previously come on about your illness, the serious illness that you still deal with to some extent. Do you think that was the main factor for you to consistently go down this entrepreneur road, even though you work with Kinsta? You consistently, do you think your illness is part of that that road path, really?
I mean, that didn't happen until I was like 25 or 26. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis after suddenly starting to feel pain in my stomach after never having experienced really any medical stuff in my life until then. And all of a sudden, winding up in hospital beds, going to see doctors nonstop for years. And so, that was definitely one of my lowest points of my life, because I didn't, as an entrepreneur, you don't, have a lot of time, and then suddenly not to be able to do anything that you were used to. It's just like, it's a low blow. And then the question mark of like, is this fixable at all? Because ulcerative colitis it's not curable. There is no cure, just like with Crohn's or celiac disease. It's just something you're dealt with and you have to deal with and figure out how to live with it. And fortunately for me, I had to go through, a year or two of figuring out that the doctors don't know much in this space yet, and figuring out that like, hey, I can fix this myself or cope with it with diet and little tricks and little things here. And so, I've been 100% gluten-free for a couple of years now. That was the biggest thing that helped me. And so, it's just finding things like that, that was definitely my biggest blow. But I would also say, you know, being an entrepreneur working from home has been a lot easier because of that illness. I wouldn't want this illness and having to go into a workplace, or, you know, it's also made, I don't travel a lot, or like, it limits my ability to go to like a lot of WordCamps. I just don't go to a lot of WordCamps because flying and going to places where I don't know exactly what I can eat, it's not easy for me, and I can get sick really easily if I eat something wrong. Even gluten-free foods, there are lots that don't agree with me. So, you know, here in Scottsdale, Arizona, it's probably one of the best places to live if you're trying to eat gluten-free. And, you know, I have certain foods that I just eat all the time, and it's just because I have to trial and error of what my stomach will tolerate. But yeah,
I just thought, thanks for being so upfront about all that. I think it was just an interesting conversation, because sometimes your weaknesses drive you down a road, and you just do it for practical reasons. But the outcomes can be bad as well as really good in the end result. What do you reckon about the article, Chris?
I thought it was really well written, and I commend Brian on the just sharing all that, and it shows to me a lot of skills that are in high demand these days. Number one is the ability to write. It's like a dying art. Number two, just some of the stuff Brian's into in terms of like early retirement, like finances, entrepreneurial skills, marketing skills, technology skills, and really just the honest take is it's just really refreshing. I too, like when I'm watching YouTube or Facebook, the ads I'm getting served about all the business opportunities and how I just need to join affiliate programs and everything's going to be great is like, it's just something seriously wrong with our culture. I can only imagine someone who doesn't have the deep experience in this industry, like what the delusions that this is causing in society, and kind of broken dreams, and just unrealistic expectations in society. So we just need more content like this out there. And I had a question for Brian, actually. I'm always fascinated by this. A lot of entrepreneurs, I suspect, they do a combination, or a lot of entrepreneurs I respect, they do a combination of their own. There's like three things. There's like this creative stuff, then there's their entrepreneurial side projects, and then there's also going in and out of jobs like Kinsta CMO. Like why that balance? Like why the mix? That's one question, and I have a second question for you.
Okay. I would say some of the question of that is stability, I guess you could say. And some of those things, while failing, I needed a paycheck. Like, I won't lie. Like, some of that, I needed a paycheck during some of those failures because I was failing or not making enough money at the time. I'm at the point where now I think I figured out how to actually make good money on the internet. Whereas back then, you know, making $100 in a day on the internet back then was a huge deal to me. You know, it's a lot different now. So, but you got to start somewhere too. So you got to start, you know, from zero and then work your way up, I think. But yeah, I think having the stability is one of the main reasons. And also another reason is partially because my brother and I are huge into early retirement stuff and finances. And so I'm at the point in my life where I'm grinding, I'm hustling night and day because I want to retire early. Like I'm going to retire early. I have my goals set. I'm going to hit my goals and, then kind of, you know, do what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like I'll probably end up just blogging for fun, to be honest, until I'm dead. Like that's my plan. And I will love every second of it. But right now, yeah, I'm working literally as hard as I can. And some of that is, you know, having, you know, a good paycheck coming in plus doing the side hustle in the evenings. Like it's kind of a good combo to earn a lot of money. So yeah.
That's awesome. And then the second question, just more related to the content of this article, is a lot of entrepreneurs, they will tell a story like this, but they have to wait until they have a certain level of success till they're comfortable to tell about like how hard it's been. Like, so you're 15 years in, has it really taken 15 years to be comfortable? Or at what point did you start sharing publicly about how the struggle? Or have you always done that?
Yeah. I've kind of always done that. I feel like I've always been pretty honest on the internet. And so I am an affiliate marketer too. And, I know how it goes. Like, you write stuff to convert. That's, the sole purpose of being an affiliate marketer. But I've always tried to write things about only stuff I use. And then all the stories I share, they're literally word for word what happened. I'm not making anything up. And so I do actually feel like that has helped me, though, because a lot of the readers of my blogs and on social, I think it comes through in your writing, and people know that you're just a genuine person, and it's, I think, refreshing to find sites like that. And I think that's why people come back to read my site. I get quite a few comments on my site, which is awesome. So I can engage with people. But yeah, and I follow, it's hard to find sites like that nowadays that are just genuine. I follow a couple people online that do the same approach, and I just love reading their stuff because I know they're sharing exactly what they're going through at that moment in their life, basically.
All right. What do you reckon, Sally?
Well, Brian has my heartfelt sympathy. I got sick at 24 and I've never gotten well. And that's why I can't have an 8 to 5 job. I became an entrepreneur, not due to ambition, but because I'm unemployable. And although I was very ambitious before in my previous career, the thing is that this is actually how it works for everybody is, you try some stuff and it blows up in your face, and then, you try another thing and it's successful, and then maybe it's super successful, but somebody comes along and disrupts the industry and you got to start over. And this is human existence. There are a lot of fantasies put out there, this kind of Disney movie version of entrepreneurship. And it used to be those kinds of rags to riches story, young man works hard, makes good, becomes wealthy. It's kind of the same myth that we have. And if you really expect things to work that way, you are going to be disappointed and you may give up. And when I was studying directing, my directing teacher said, you should actually hope that you have a huge flop early on and understand what that's like. And because it's going to be easier to deal with then than, if you're a huge success and then somewhere in the middle, the rug gets pulled out from under you. We have to be able to get past those things and to persist and to adapt ourselves.
That's great. On to the next story. The web we broke. What did you like about this one, Sally?
Let me bring that up. But this was coming at about the same time as Sir Tim Berners-Lee's kind of happy birthday internet post. So yes, if you hadn't noticed, the World Wide Web turned 30 this year. And I remember vividly my first encounter with the World Wide Web via Mosaic on a grayscale screen, and not actually a dial-up line because I was part of the university system, but that what Ethan Marcotte is talking about in this article is accessibility and a massive problem that we still have with accessibility. And I mean, in the very beginning, but before I even knew it was a thing, the web was purely textual. There was a browser called Lynx, and then it started to become a more visual thing, which was a large part of why it attracted me. The thing I particularly highlighted was pages containing popular JavaScript frameworks were more likely to have accessibility errors than those that didn't use those frameworks. It's a comment on a study from the accessibility. And it's sort of like, whoa, And
Well, I think I'm no expert in that field, but I've come to that conclusion as well. What do you? So, Spencer, do you think the accessibility movement that was really very dominant, and it was kind of UK based? You know, I had some of the founders or some of the mover and shakers from the UK on the show. Has it died a death to some extent because of the JavaScript libraries and JavaScript dominance of front end web design and that whole area?
I'm going to use a metaphor of Cuba. Anybody
Love your metaphors, do you?
I'm going to answer with a metaphor. That's how I work. In Cuba, after the embargo, they couldn't get any modern vehicles. So 2019, there are cars that are time machines back to 1950 and earlier that are still driving around. Those cars continue to operate because the owners had no choice but to keep them running forever. The world we live in, it's amazing that we can all actually do what we're doing now, because there's no actual law that says you have to do things this way or that way to be on the internet, or this browser or that browser, or JavaScript or server side or whatever. It's amazing that we can even do anything at all. I think accessibility is vitally important. However, as we've seen, while people are busy working on their 1950s cars, the world moved on, and pretty soon, hopefully, we'll be all flying in hovercraft, and those cars will still be in Cuba driving around. My point is that the web is so dynamically evolving.
God help us all if we end up in hovercraft.
Whatever. I'm saying
Uh-uh.
that it should be fundamental that everybody should be able to access some things. But the problem is, while the good fight is going on over that 1950s car being accessible, the hovercrafts are being made, and whether those people make them accessible or not is a different question than whether the people fighting over the old 1950s cars are going to make those accessible. I think that we have to accept, with so many ideas and so many technologies, and again, as we talked about, I hope, knock on wood, in a year or two, that a lot of the web stuff that I'm doing on a browser will be coming through my eyeglasses or my hearing aid or in my brain implant or something, because I don't know that necessarily typing and looking at a screen is the way that I need to get most of the stuff. Maybe I could talk to one of my girlfriends like Siri or Alexa. And if that's the case, then now we got to talk about accessibility issues with voice commands. You see what I mean? So I like the concept that he brings up here. But I also think that it's kind of like one of those nostalgias, like, don't you remember swinging on swings that were made out of metal in 1970 and landing on hard rocks and, blah, blah, blah. It's like, let's talk about the thing that's going on all forward, because looking back at things that are clearly broken is part of the discussion, but not the whole discussion.
Yeah, I see where you're going from, but I don't fully jump on board.
You'll never agree with me. That's fine. I love that. That's
Yeah, there we go. Brian, it's interesting with Kinsta. Has with a very heavily, with Gutenberg, we're using a JavaScript library, web pages that are highly using a lot of JavaScript. Are they noticeably slower than well-written, accessible CSS, HTML sites? What do you think, Brian?
I think it's mainly the developers that cause performance problems because they're piecing together different frameworks or different technologies. Sometimes the thing that I thought with this article was interesting about accessibility was my brother and I, who we build and sell 2 WordPress premium plugins. And the thing I immediately thought was this is because we ran into an issue with this ourselves and had to shift things quickly and realized we screwed this up. And yes, we excluded some people. Was about 4 or 5 months into launching one of our first plugins, we got an email from a guy that used a screen reader, and suddenly he couldn't use our plugin. And after looking at our plugin, we were like, wow, yeah, we literally excluded anyone that's using a screen. Like the way we built our setting toggles and stuff, we just excluded a whole group of people, not on purpose, just completely we didn't think about it at all. And so we actually, went back, and my brother is really the coder, but, recoded it so that you can use it with a screen reader, that the toggles work slightly differently so that everybody can use it. But I think it's important that we don't try to exclude these people, because there are a lot of people with screen readers too. I know I've personally known some people with like carpal tunnel RSI stuff too a lot. And, a lot of those people use screen readers too. And so it's not just people that with visibility issues and stuff. So I actually think accessibility is actually fairly important. The problem is it's usually up to the developers, because like Spencer was mentioning, the internet's not really regulated. It's like the wild, wild west. So there's nothing that tells a developer you have to make this user accessible. I mean, there are, yes, you should.
In education and government, there is.
And there, yeah, that's what I was gonna. Yeah, actually, there are certain places where you have to, but for the most part, like the WordPress repository, there's, it's half those are probably accessible, half of those probably aren't. I personally know clients at Kinsta and clients that use our plugins that use screen readers, and so these people need these types of things built into the products to actually use them at all. So accessibility is something, I think actually we've dropped the ball on a little bit, and I think this guy went a little overboard in this article though. But I think it's just something to keep in mind as we develop things going forward.
So Chris, you got a plugin, you're building a community. It's in the learning space with you and your team. How much conversation do you have about your plugin being accessible?
We're not perfect, but it is a priority for us. And as an example, even just yesterday, one of our users has mobility issues, and she actually has a platform about 4 different venues to make education for to make festivals more accessible, to make certain kind of businesses more accessible. She has courses about that, and she's using our LMS to teach that stuff. And I was talking to her yesterday, and I'm just working with her as a user, as an accessibility expert, to make sure that I understand the needs of the community. And we're going to be doing a webinar to just educate about accessibility issues, because I think at first it is ultimately up to the developers. I agree with that point, but there's also a lack of education and awareness around the issue that needs to really amp up first before I think we get more major adoption and more global standards.
Rightio. I think we're going to wrap it up. I think we're just going to go into our tips of the week. Any kind of article, product, plugin, anything that's come on our radar that we found interesting. And I'm going to talk about Vue Player. Vue Player, I was kind of tuned into it by Adam from WP Crafter, and I've been using it a bit more. I've got a great deal on it, and I've been using it. I've also got a Vimeo account, and it offers, I think what it offers is in between Vimeo and Vistia. It offers a middle ground at a reasonable price. So if you're looking to host a load of videos, and you're looking for something that's got more functionality than a basic Vimeo package, but you don't want to cough up the kind of money your Vistia want, look at Vue Player. Sally, have you got any tip, trick, or something you want to share with the viewers and listeners?
Yes, my new toy is Draftium, which is a tool for mockups and wireframing, which I heard about on a Slack channel yesterday from somebody who had explained that she had a client that preferred the mockup to the actual Photoshop comp. And I'm like, so was this like a high fidelity or a low fidelity mockup? And she said, oh, it was Draftium, and I hadn't heard of that. And so, you know, I mean, it's one of these things is I try not to chase the shiny too much, but I do tend to do it with mock-up tools. It's like, do I like this better? Do I like that better? Is it quicker? Oh, screw it. I'm just going to build the prototype in WordPress. So I'm looking at it now, and it seems like something where I might be able to talk to clients to get them to sort of point me at, oh, this, I want sort of this type of layout on my homepage, or you know, to include those type of elements and comment.
That's great. Chris, got anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a free tool. I think they have a paid version, but I'm just using the free version of vidIQ. And I've been doing more and more with YouTube and just trying to be more data driven and kind of understand the platform more. And it does a great job of kind of just exposing a lot of data and search volumes for various keyword phrases and what tags people are using in their videos and things like that, which I think just contributes. If you do video marketing, especially on YouTube, or just kind of want to understand the landscape and search volume of certain phrases, vidIQ is a great tool.
It is. Spencer, got anything?
I used vidIQ before, and it was great. I don't know how it's been affected by the Google's limiting your access to keyword data, but it was really good for finding content and so forth. So good competitive tool. Mine is Enable Media Replace. It's a free plugin for WordPress. Essentially, it solves the annoying problem for those who have, let's say, if you're using the media library, particularly for PDF downloads or for other content you're delivering to consumers or customers, if you have that updated frequently, like a zip file bundle, this allows you to seamlessly replace it with the latest version without changing the link or the naming convention. Great for a membership site where the deliverable is a bundle and you don't want to have to each time manually do it. Now somebody could just dump it into the place and replace it without it, you know, giving it a hyphen number 1, hyphen number 2, hyphen number 3 or something.
Oh, yes, and panelists, please put those in the Slack channel so I can put them in the notes. I don't know if you got anything, Brian, or you want to plug your own plugins. What do you want to do? Or you got something else you want to mention? I
was just going to mention the Squish online. It's a web tool that Google launched a couple months ago. It's just an image compression thing, but I think we all probably use image compression plugins. I do too, but I found that in my workflow, there are some times where you already know, because of how often you use it, that you have a large image and you know the image compression plugin is not going to get it down to what it should be. And so the Squish app I've been using, actually, I use it almost probably on a daily basis now, where I have a big tool. It'll get it down to like really, really small. They did an awesome job on the compression ratio stuff. And so I use it for like very important images that I'm working on. So it's a good like complement to your image compression plugin, I've found. Yeah, I use it and it's fantastic, isn't it? All right. Yeah. I think we had a great chat. Spencer, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to, Spencer?
Great. You guys, you can reach me at WP-Launchify.com or on YouTube at WP-Launchify. Anybody who is building some kind of a membership site with marketing automation on WordPress, it's a free call. Let's talk about what you're up to. That's great. Brian, what's the best website, and do you want to plug your own plugins? Please go ahead. How can people find out more about you and what you're up to? Yeah, so I mean, you can find Kinsta, Kinsta.com, or you can find me on Twitter. I literally live on Twitter, Brian Lee Jackson. Or if you're interested in our plugins, we have a performance plugin and a marketing coupon plugin. You can just find them on forgemedia.io. That's our kind of company site with the plugin list on there. So. Oh, that's great. Thanks, Brian. Chris, how people find out more about you and what you're up to? If you're a course creator and you use WordPress, you can find our plugin at lifterlms.com. We also have a podcast for course creators called LMScast. That's great. And Sally, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to? You can find me at WPFangirl.com. I am at Sally Getch on Twitter. And if you can spell my name, you will find me. I am unique in Google. That's great, folks. And I think it's been a great show. We'll see you next week where we'll be discussing the latest WordPress news stories and the internet in general. And we'll see you next week, folks. Bye. Bye. Bye, guys.